Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Interviewing Wednesday. It is May 31st, 2023. Hard to believe we're 5 months done with the year after today. Please note this event is being recorded and is currently live on Facebook. The recording will be on the Career DFW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channel for others to view in the future. By participating in this event, you give consent for your name and picture to appear. Please note that any comments you put in the Zoom chat window will not appear in the recording. For those people on Zoom, if you have any questions or comments, today we're going to have a little bit different kind of program. You're welcome to enter that information in this chat window. For those on Facebook, if you have any questions, just put them in the comment field. I am monitoring that feed. We'll be sure to get those questions and comments entered or said for you. Also, this is all about networking. In addition, if you want to put in your personal information, put in your name, kind of job you're looking for, job title, name of a couple target companies, put in your LinkedIn profile, your email address, phone number, whatever it is you like to do. Connect with everybody else who's on the call. Expand your connections. Let people know you saw them here today on Interviewing Wednesday. Well, before we start with our programming today, I thought we'd quickly go through and let Walt and Ron tell you a little bit about each of the organizations. So Walt, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Interview Success Workshop?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And I remember to unmute myself today, so I'm progressing, Jeff.
After 3 years.
Yeah, that's right. If you get a little bit more time to practice. A lot of you already know me and know that I offer a free Interview Success Workshop. You have to be registered to attend, and that QR code on the screen will start an email to me to my Yahoo email address and ask for available dates, and I'll send you some dates and get you registered. Now, I only do 1 or 2 at a time. It's online and it's very, very informal. It is not a mock interview. It is the learning interview. And what are we trying to learn? Well, it focuses on selling because everyone agrees we're selling ourselves, and I define that as who we are, what we do, and how we help. So we would like to combine our soft skills, our personality, our characteristics with our activities, the things that we do, the knowledge that we have and the skills we have to do those things to achieve the results and the value that we bring to the job. So it's easy to come to and enjoy. We like to enjoy our learning. It's not a sweatshop. It's just a good time to get together, discuss the 12 basic categories of questions, look at options as to how we might answer these types of categories. Are there any structures? Are there any strategies or ideas and opinions as to how we might answer a question? It all depends on who's asking, what the question is, and where you are in the process. So you can't always just say, here's how you answer a question. It just depends on those 3 factors. And so what are those options? How can we sell? So but enjoy you coming down. We're gonna record your interview and you'll get a copy of that. I'm going to analyze your job description and show you what we can tell from that. I'm going to give you a handout and another hour-long video that goes over everything in the handout. So you've got a lot of information. It's not just the interview session itself. It's some of the handouts and resources that I make available to you. Be glad to have you come on down and have some learning without squirming. Interviewing is not an interrogation. It's simply a great conversation. We can't practice that here, but practice does remove fear, and we can win with joyous celebration.
Well, thank you very much. Applause, applause, applause. All right, Ron, before we get to our program today, why don't you tell us a little bit about the practice interview team?
All right, the practice interview team really is kind of like a follow-on to Walt's class, where we're actually giving you a real interview. Even though we use the word practice, it's the same as a job interview with a panel. And our job really is to help you to cross that finish line and get that job offer. So our goal is to help you with the skills for an interview and understanding where you have strengths, where you may need some improvement. And it's all built around helping you to build confidence and to increase your ability to sell your differentiation to an audience. That's what we're about. You can do it once, you can do it more than once. So to request it, you would send an email to the address you see on the screen right there, dallaspitcrew@gmail.com. We require 3 things from you. Number 1, the resume that you want to use. Number 2, a current job description that you want to interview for. And number 3, your availability. Okay. We offer 3 ways that we interview people. Number 1, the first and the third Wednesdays of every month, we have an in-person interview at the address listed on the screen there. The second and the fourth, and maybe the fifth if we have one, we do it via this method here, via the Zoom, which is a scheduled Zoom call. So you could interview and everybody else would be blacked out, and it would be just like a Zoom interview. The other thing, Monday through Friday, we also do offer Zoom interviews that fit your schedule anywhere from 8:30 to 5. So if you need that, then make that request, and then I try to match that up with the coaches that are available for that period. So that really is what the practice interview team is all about.
Ron, thank you very much. Well, I'm going to stop sharing and I'll let you go with our programming for today here.
All right. So a couple of things in the chat window. I've put a link where you can get all of our resources for the practice interview team. And the presentation that we're about to see today is actually in a Word document format out there called Interview Preparation Tips. So it's already there for you to get. I just converted this into a PowerPoint. There are 13 slides. So the goal today is not to spend a lot of time on the presentation. I'm going to go through it fairly quickly. The goal really is to open this up to questions that you have about an interview specifically that you may not have been able to ask before. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to go through this presentation pretty quickly just to stoke ideas and to allow you to have the questions. So give me one moment and I will share this presentation. Okay, can everybody see this?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so anatomy of an interview. What is this? Number 1, what is an interview? As Walt has already kind of let us know, an interview really is a place for us to sell ourselves, okay? And in every interview, we want to do 3 things. We want to sell who I am, what I do, but most importantly, how are you going to help that company that you're interviewing with, okay? So I actually have pinned to my monitor right here, these 3 things, and it's not because I'm interviewing anymore, but it also helps me as an interviewer to understand what to listen for people from that perspective. Okay, these are the kind of 10 things we're going to talk about. So since we're going to talk about them, I'm not going to go through them here. Number 1, it is a selling activity. Congratulations if you got the interview. That means they think you have at least some minimum set of skills that meet a criteria. You need to remember that, okay? So you are selling your skills, but if you got there, they've already determined you've probably got what it takes to do the job. So 2 key items in every interview: high energy. Doesn't mean you need to be bouncing off the walls, but it means you have to have energy, okay? And number 2, don't do negative responses. Those are the things that will really hurt you. Absolutely research the company. Come prepared with some questions about the company. Come prepared to make statements about their values, that you've read it, okay? They may have an interviewing handbook for you. I did when I went to interview with Amazon Web Services, okay? So research the company. Looks like I added some extra stuff here. Study the job description. Print out that job description. Highlight the key requirements, the attributes, the skills that they are looking for. Be prepared to share those skills that they're looking for by using our STAR story. Have a good opening. Almost all interviews are going to open up with one of these 2 questions. Tell me about yourself, or walk me through your background, okay? When you give an answer to that, your goal is to try to keep that to 90 seconds, 2 minutes maximum, okay? And it should have various components. Number one, you ought to have what's called a statement of enthusiasm. Why do you want this job? You know, make sure they understand why you want it and be prepared for this answer. That's the thing about interviews. You need to be prepared because it's like anything else in life. Okay. So when you're giving your answer, give a summary of your education level. Okay. Don't go back to high school, college, grad school. If you have any certifications, if you have a graduate school, things like that. A brief description of an accomplishment that matches something from the job description. Take one of the items on the job description and make sure that you can give an answer to how you've already solved that in some way, shape, or form at some other place. Okay. The other thing is, when you finish your answer to that, always exit with the question. Okay, you want to exit with a question because it can literally give you a roadmap as to how you want to navigate the rest of that interview. You know, an example could be, I'm curious, what skills would your perfect candidate have, and what would they have been able to accomplish to be recognized as an outstanding hire? Okay, so be writing down for us when we finish with this presentation why that would be a good question and what you might learn if they give you an answer. STAR stories. STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. Okay, these are how you want to format your answers in your 60 to 90 seconds. Okay, always give the result. That's the key thing that they want to hear. If you run out of time, make sure you have that result, because then you can always stop and say, would you like to hear more? But make sure your answers are tailored in that time frame, because otherwise you're probably going to run out of time. Prepare your RFL. RFL stands for reason for leaving. Okay, many people get stuck here. My previous successor, Mark, is very good at answering this question. Okay, so Mark McDonald is the person that succeeded me in leading the pit crew. This is kind of his specialty. So if you're struggling with this, you can reach out to him. But here's an example of one of them, as you can just see right there. Very succinct, and stay out of the negative territory, because you don't want to get into that negative territory that makes them then start to question and poke a little bit farther as they keep going through it. Prepare a good close. Just like anything else, you want to start strong and you want to end strong. In the ending, make sure you have questions that you're going to ask. Have at least 10 questions. Well, I'm going to hold off on this for a minute, but have written questions, okay? And you also want to ask a question at the end, such as, are there any skills or attributes that you're looking for that we have not fully addressed? You know, it's kind of like a poker game. Don't leave anything on the table there. Also, ask for the job. There are many ways you can ask for the job. Here are some questions that you can ask that lead to what are the next steps. Okay, who may I expect to be contacted from? If I don't hear back from them, can I contact them? Remember, this is really important. Keeping your answer 60 to 90 seconds. If you give us an answer that's 5 minutes long, even if it's the best answer in the world, you risk us forgetting the good parts because we turn our brains off, at minute 3, minute 4, as you keep going on and on. So it's really important that if you don't keep those answers short, you do run that risk. Have an open notebook and a pen, okay? Have your questions on one side, use the other side to jot notes. And it may be okay to write down the question, especially if it is a multi-part question. However, do not write down every question. The interviewers will take note of that. And then they will start to question, why is this person writing down everything? And that can actually hurt your chances from that perspective. although it's not really kind of mentioned here, the other thing is, in the part of selling yourself, know your resume in and out. That is your life. As interviewers, we don't expect that you're going to have to constantly go back to your resume to get answers. All right. And lastly, always have a minimum of 10 questions written down. Piece of paper, 10 questions. Put a number by them so that you have them in a priority that you want to ask them. The other thing is, do not wait till the end for questions because you're probably going to run out of time. Ask questions during the interview. Your goal really is to get half of the questions you have written down. Ask during that interview itself, because then if you do that, you turn that interview into a conversation, two-way conversation instead of an interrogation. And that's going to make you memorable and stand out, especially from a differentiation perspective as you move forward. All right, so this is the end of this. Like I said, this is already published in a Word document out there. So I just kind of wanted to bring this up to talk about what are the major points to make sure you need to cover. And now I want to open it up for questions that you might have about any of those items or any other thing relating to specifically an interview with a job search function. Feel free to either put your question in the window or go ahead and just ask the question.
Yeah, you're welcome just to unmute your mic or hold down the space bar and ask your question.
You can turn your videos back on too.
Go ahead, Chris, you've got your hand up. Go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, I was good. What's the importance of sending a follow-up thank you note that maybe includes additional questions, the answer questions you may have or answers to something you think you maybe didn't clarify enough? But yeah, I guess especially in the South for sending a thank you note after the interview.
Walt, I'll let you go first on this one.
It's rare that you use always and never, but this is one of the times for always. Always send a thank you note. Who do you send it to? To the person, every person you've talked to should get a thank you note. In the closing, one of the questions you should ask is, who do I contact if I have additional questions? So that then they'll give you this contact and you want to find out how to reach them so that if you want to send questions, now you have permission to send them and they'll pay attention to them because they've given you permission to do that. So I'd always put that question in the close so you can send questions. And then the thank you note can be a separate document, and you can include maybe a question in the thank you note, but the thank you note is definitely advisable. I know that one person, we used to say a handwritten thank you note was the most powerful kind of thank you note. But today, it's kind of hard to send thank you notes. We don't know addresses. Maybe the business is not local where we could drop off a thank you note. But the person took his thank you note card and wrote out a thank you, took a picture of it, and then attached it to an email, which had some personalization to it as well as a digital response. Does that help?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, Chris, I don't know if I would go back and ask questions in a thank you note. I think in a thank you note, you just want to thank them for the interview. You may want to bring up a point or two that you talked about, maybe reminding them how you've got the experience to do something. If you need to ask further questions, you want to reach out to that person in person, not via thank you note.
I concur with what Jeff said there. It's not a place to ask more questions.
If at the end of the interview, they say, do you have any questions for us? Depending on the time frame. And another suggestion is at the beginning of the interview is asking how much time do we have today? I don't care how much it's been scheduled. It can change. So whether it's a half hour, hour, whatever. But many times they say, do you have any questions for us? They look at their watch and the interview's over. We don't get a chance to ask very many questions. So I would ask, how much time do we have left to discuss questions? And you also have the option to say, could we schedule some additional time so that we could talk and I could ask you some questions? And so ask for both of those. They may just say send it in an email. but I would add that as an option as well.
Let's see here. Question was asked in the chat window. What questions should not be asked in the closing? Ron responded, but why don't you go into more detail or tell people, talk about it?
So one of the things I think you should never ask is, don't ask how much does a job pay? You know, there's a time and place for that, but it's definitely not at the end of an interview. And it's, you know, usually going to be in your second or third interview from that perspective.
Yeah, pretty much any of the benefits. You don't want to ask about benefits. You want them to offer you the job. You want them to want you. And then you find out what the benefits are like. And if you don't like them, you don't accept the job, or then that's where you negotiate.
The other thing not to ask, because this can be taken in a negative way, is are there things that you believe that I don't have that we need to further discuss? Okay, are there things that I have not proven that we need to discuss, because that may indicate, that's kind of a negative indicator from a question.
There's a positive way to try to find out that information where it's not so negative.
Yes.
How would I compare to the ideal candidate? And that's a very positive question. And they, you know, the problem with the interviewing today is they don't tell you anything. We have to tell them everything. So they may not answer that, but you're sending a message that you want to be the ideal or the top candidate. You can still ask to see if you can find out where you stand. We actually deserve, we should know where we stand in things. I would not ask, how do I compare to other candidates? I don't think that information tells us anything. So if they tell us anything, does it mean they're going to offer us or give us? You know, it's useless. So I wouldn't even ask that question. I would not ask questions today. In fact, one of Jeff's tips of the week was remote work, asking about. So, and it's kind of an idea of, before you get into the things you really want in a job from your perspective, wait until they want you. Wait until the time they want to make you an offer. Then you can start negotiating if it's remote or not, or part remote or hybrid, whatever it might be. So kind of stay on their agenda rather than yours about what you want. Because if they say, you know, what do you look for in a job? Well, I want opportunity. I want this. I want money. I want time off. I want vacation. I want, you know, all the things you want. Those are not the positive things that we want. What I want is to make a difference. I want to improve customer satisfaction. I want to increase revenue. I want to save money. You know, that's all on their perspective. So that's how you can try to stay away from some of those things.
Yeah, just remember, when you go into an interview, it's not about what you want. It's about, how can I help you? They've got a problem. They need to hire somebody because they've got a problem. They need more sales. They need somebody to handle customer service. They need production people, whatever that question is. So just keep your whole interview process, your whole mindset when you're going in. How can I help you succeed? What do I need to do? What can I do? Or what can I tell you from my past that will prove to you that I can do what you need me to do? And if you keep it framed that way, you know, that'll be a lot of interviews, most interviews, that's not the way a candidate comes in. So keep it that way. What can I do to help you? Paul, did I see you had your hand up with a question? No? Okay.
I see Roger has asked a question about sending a value statement after being rejected. Roger, can you kind of add some more color to that? And I can think of 2 or 3 kind of other questions around that.
Well, if you think you did very well, it was a great conversation, you're a great fit, you just want to take another stab at it, you know, to try to see if you could pry that door open. I just wonder what you guys' opinion was of that.
I always think that it's good, even if you've been rejected, to send something back, because I personally have experienced where their candidate that they made the offer for some reason declined it. Or that a job could have been put on hold, and when they come back, they're not starting from scratch. They're going to take their top 2 or 3. So I don't think that's necessarily bad, but don't make it like you're still not over being rejected. make it in a thank you kind of method, in that you appreciate the opportunity and would love to be considered for any future opportunities, things like that.
Yeah, be thankful, and then 2 months later, write down on your calendar, 60 days later, to send them another email to follow up going, I really enjoyed meeting you. I really was enthusiastic, really enjoyed meeting the staff. I didn't know if there's anything new coming up. We've had at least 2 people over the last 14 years that I led the North Dallas Plano group on Friday, 2 people who did that, and they got hired about 75, 80 days later, because the person they hired originally either didn't fit or couldn't do the job. And so here you are coming back going, I really enjoyed meeting you. I know I was one of your, you don't have to say you're a top candidate, but they know you were one of the top 2 or 3 candidates. They happen to pick the other person. They may go, boom, let's blow this other person out and bring you in because we liked you anyway. We thought we liked the other guy better, but it didn't work out. So, 60 days, keep it positive. You never know how it's going to work.
There's also the story of the person who sent back the thank you after getting the rejection letter and talking to them and saying, I still really, would like to work for the company. I'm interested in additional opportunities. If you know anyone I should talk to, et cetera. And they send him an email back and says, oh, we sent you the wrong letter. You should have gotten an offer letter. If he hadn't sent that note back and just ignored the rejection. So multiple things can happen. Always stay positive, particularly if it's your target company, this place you want to work. Just because you get rejection from this particular opportunity, you keep knocking on the door.
So Chris, I see you got a question. Can you ask about your direct supervisor's management style? Why don't you talk about that before we give an answer? What do you think? You wrote down the question.
Well, yeah, I think it's good to help kind of see if they are kind of style with you. If you like authentic, if you like I don't know if you like micromanaging, but I kind of like somebody who maybe has an open door that we can go in and ask questions. Some managers are not that way. Some like to do everything by emails and assignments and not talk to you much personally. Some of it is management by wandering around. So last time the interviewer people in companies will let you know that. It kind of gives you an idea of the culture. And if this is the person you're going to be working with day in and day out, who's going to be responsible for your performance appraisal, it may be nice to pick up some tips on what they're going to look for, what their style is, if that's something you can live with.
So I think you can do that, but you can't just ask them about their style. You're going to have to do it in the form of a question of, here is a situation. Can you, I've been in this situation before. Can you kind of help me understand how this situation would be handled at your company? So don't make it direct, and also make it so that, hopefully they will answer you, but I don't think you can be direct with the interviewer. I feel it's probably going to put them off because, number one, being an interviewer, and hundreds of interviewers, that to me is going to raise a red flag of, okay, what is this person worried about?
I have a couple of thoughts. Number one, next Monday, I think it's the 6th at 9 a.m., the Fort Worth Career Search Network, Clayton Stockdale leads that group. I'm giving a presentation on vetting, values, and culture. And we're talking just about that. What's one of them, Christopher? It's just, the leadership value. And the presentation goes along as how do we generate those questions that Ron is talking about? Example for leadership, because we'd like to see what they are. If you're in a team meeting, a team interview where, they all report to the manager, ask them, how would you describe, the manager? How would they talk about it? You can ask the manager leadership type questions like Ron was. Examples of those are, how do you handle a problem employee? Have you fired anyone before? How do you go about doing that? How do you communicate? What's your standard method of communicating? How do you have team meetings? Ask questions that describe the operating culture, not just the description of it. I mean, what's really going on? Because I can tell you, I'm very communicative, I'm very open, and I had a manager who said, very open, come see him all the time, and I could never get in to see him, right? So what is it? What's really going on and what's happening? The working style. Does that help, Christopher? I definitely think you ought to ask. You want to find out. The 4 things we want to fit: the job, the company, it includes the values and the culture, the leadership, and the team. If you got all 4 of those as a fit, then that's your dream job. Kevin, why don't you open your mic and ask a question there?
Sure, thank you. So I was asking about the recorded interview and getting some insight on some tips with that. I have one scheduled later this week, and I have done one before where you are given a question, and it's usually 5 to 7 questions per the interview process, and it takes 10 or 12 minutes to record it all. But you are asked a first question, given 30 seconds to think about it, and then time to reply. And usually the clock is about 3 minutes to answer the question. My thought is to not focus on the timing, because if I look at the 3 minutes, I may ramble my question and just over talk it instead of being brief and to the point of my answer. Would like some insight on your thought about that, and also about re-recording, because sometimes it will allow you to record your answer more than once. There may be a time I think I gave the perfect reply, but maybe it is beneficial to recite it again. Go ahead and record it anyway.
Well, my comment there is, if you're doing a real interview, do you have a chance to wait 30 seconds to give an answer? You can
Yes.
pause, but you really
Oh.
shouldn't wait 30 seconds. And if you're giving an interview question and they go, okay, would you like to re-answer that question again? That's not going to happen. So, this is, if you've got your star stories and if you've got your things ready to go, and if you're ready, you should be just treat it like a regular interview. Now, the difference is you're just sitting there talking to the camera. So a recommendation would be if you can get somebody to stand or sit right behind your camera, so you're actually sort of looking at somebody else, you can tell them, you can, give your answer to that person. That may not be as dramatic, or, you may not feel as uncomfortable. You'll feel more natural. The other thing is, make sure the lighting is good, make sure the background's okay, because I know Walt's looked at a bunch, I've looked at a bunch of these interviews online. We had a program at one point that worked, that we could give samples out. And, within 10 seconds, if you went and looked at somebody and went, well, why are they wearing this bow tie? And why do they have this, funny jacket on? You don't want to distract from your answers. So those are my thoughts.
Also, because it's on a computer, I've got a timer on my phone. Because it's on a computer, I probably would have a timer on the computer and click that timer just to remind you. Even if you got your star stories down, use the tools that are available to you.
Yeah,
If
3
you
doesn't mean.
if you practice your answers for 90 seconds max, starting with brevity, let them ask for more details. Go ahead and use your brevity. Still keep the 90 seconds max rule. If I start listening to a candidate and I'm planning on recording and your answers are 3 minutes long, by the 3rd question, I've cut you off. I don't want to hear anymore. I've made my decision. So I would still you don't have to use that. I would definitely not use that 3 minutes. The hard part is that imagining you're talking to a person and you're smiling and you're energetic and all that stuff, and there's nobody there. That's the practice part. I mean, it's been 3 years now, and I'm still working on looking into the camera and imagining that I'm talking to somebody. Sometimes I practice my presentations and I turn on my computer and I record it. I can do it on Zoom. I can go back and I can look at it and look at myself and see about 50 things that I need to improve on because I don't like the way I look. But nonetheless, practice that so that you get comfortable with it, comfortable looking into the camera. Just practice that piece alone. You're going to be very different than many other candidates who are not looking into the camera into these automated interviews. You will make a connection. You will see something. You're also going to demonstrate how well you work with Zoom or whatever process they have for virtual meetings, because that's part of the job these days. And they want to see how you're going to come across. So it's basically a skill and an attribute as well as a communication skill.
On those type of interviews, since they just record your answer,
Right.
is it important to, at the very beginning, quickly restate what the question is or the essence of the question is? You know, if they ask something, you know, they ask, when have you handled a difficult situation? Is to say something like, a difficult situation I handled was, so that it allows them to keep track of what question you're answering. Because if you just go to answer, they may not be able to match it up to the question, or they may get off. Or most of them have it fairly much when you're recording, they have the question down and know the order, so they know which one you're answering. Or do you need to just real quickly, you know, kind of?
The risk you face with that is if you do it every question, it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
Because if you just do it every single question and you say that, anything you repeat, that's a good question. That's a good question. You know, anything like that that you repeat over time is going to be a negative. I suggest just go into the answer to the question. All right. But it's not a big deal. I don't think they're not going to hire you because you said my difficult situation was or whatever, but just use your star story approach and just go into the answer. It's not needed. It's not necessary. I don't think it adds anything, but it may be a risk if you do.
I
did
appreciate
put
that. Thank
in-
you.
Great, Kevin. I did put in the chat window for everybody a one-page document, a bunch of smile faces. And you can go cut one out, put a little hole in the middle for the nose, and then I go and it's sitting right over my camera. So that way I know where to look at when I'm talking to somebody. So, you know, if you're doing, it's just an easy way, just something to think about. So that way it reminds yourself where to look at.
I have a question. In these recorded interviews, should you include a question that you'd like to have an answer to, even though they're not going to answer, but that you would be interested in finding out about?
It may be a good reason to get them to call you back to give you that answer. They may or may not, may show you're thinking a little bit more.
Instead of a question, though, it might be something like when they bring that particular topic up, you say, yeah, I'm really interested in having a discussion further with you about this. I have some interesting ideas about how we might be able to approach that, and be glad to talk with you about them, and then go on to the next question.
What else can we answer for somebody about interviewing?
Don't forget, part of your preparation is go to the restroom before the interview.
Yes, mom or dad.
And have water available in case you start doing anything you need water for.
That was my question. Can you have like a water bottle or something with you? That's acceptable, right, during an interview?
Why not?
I would
Because
hold it against the candidate.
do they, you know, you can take a sip of water while that question is up before you answer. There's no problem with that. Again, if you do it every question, that's going to be a negative, but I don't think it's a problem. Anybody else think that would be, if you were the interviewer, you're the hiring person, and your candidate took a sip of water every now and then, how would you feel? Would it bother you? Anybody out there bothered by it?
No, it would not bother me at all.
Or you could disguise it into a cup that's clear and it could be wine instead of water.
Answers might come out better.
Yeah. One of the hardest parts is to, in that greeting, to have that energy and that interest into the job and this money. So it's great to be here. I'm glad to take part in this interview process. You know, I look forward to seeing you in the future in person, and then go ahead and answer, but have that greeting. Just like you're talking to somebody.
I like Kathy put a comment in the chat window. Make sure your screen, not your screen, but make sure that your camera is at eye level. She said, I had a Teams interview earlier and the interview was looking down at the screen. It was so annoying. So, if you need to, if your camera's not at eye level, and it depends on where the camera is in the computer, because some cameras I know are right above the keyboard. And in that case, you're having to look down. I mean, it's just a shame if your camera is right above the keyboard and not at the top of the screen. You really should try to get an external camera so you can pop the camera on top of the computer so that you're looking, so it's at the right level with you. And put it up on books. I'm sure you've probably seen news reports back during COVID where reporters are interviewing other people, and when they'd have a shot of themselves, their laptop was sitting up on a bunch of books, so it would be at eye level. Makes a big difference.
It can be really weird. I've got two very large monitors. My camera is literally 22 inches away from me, taped between two monitors to get it eye level.
Yeah.
So I asked a question during the presentation of why should you ask a question when you exit? Tell me about yourself. So why do you think you should do that?
It can gauge your interest in the position.
So you asking a question will gauge your interest?
Gauge it would potentially could demonstrate for the interviewers what your interest level is in the position or the company.
Okay. That's a possibility. Anybody think any other reasons you might do that? What if you ask a question such as, I've read the job description, but can you tell me specifically, Mr. Hiring Manager, whomever, what your ideal candidate, what attributes they possess? They answer that, what's that going to tell you?
It would help you frame your answers to the following questions, right?
That is absolutely correct. It helps you frame your answers. It can also help you pick out which star stories. Let's say you've got 10 or 12 star stories already prepared. From that answer, you may know, hey, I need to use, 1, 3, 7, and 9, but leave these others on the table. So it can definitely provide a good roadmap for where you want to go.
Ron, how many of those star stories should we have?
32.
55. Hike.
Well, to me,
I think the answer is however many you feel comfortable. I personally have never gone in to an interview with less than 10. Now, Paul, how many do you have?
I have about 33, but
33. I think you win the prize.
I keep them on a spreadsheet too. But my personal, feeling is that you should have your favorite 10 that you can tell pretty much in your sleep. And because, you can answer most questions with your favorite 10. So the ones that you like telling, that you get excited about telling, that you feel really comfortable with, that tells a good story, that your stories that you really like to tell, you can answer all kinds of questions with your favorite 10.
In the interview success workshop, I suggest that we take a job description and we do a mapping function. Every item in the job description has its own line, all right? And then you say, what story in my library of stories includes this particular requirement? And it can include soft skills as well as experience and as well as knowledge. And when you map, you can probably find that there's one story that may satisfy 4 different requirements in the job description. It's not one story per requirement, but map your soft skills into it, because you can demonstrate collaboration in your STAR story through your action steps. You can demonstrate leadership. You can demonstrate an initiative. You can, all those different things you can show in the story so that you have that. Then if you've got 5 or 6 stories, maybe up to 10, but 5 or 6 or so, one of those will probably demonstrate several. So look at the basic requirements for your job, get multiple job descriptions, see what they're really looking for, kind of map those into it. So, okay, here's my generic, here's how I can do it, and then here's the stories that map into those so I can have them. So that's my suggestion.
One other thing that you may want to try is, I think you should write your STAR stories out. Paul does his on a spreadsheet. I like to sit there and handwrite them out. So we just get some index cards and write your bullet point off your resume at the very top of the index card. And then I put an STAR down the side here, and I'll put 1-line situation, 1 line with the task. Here's 1 line was the action, or 1 line was the result. And it's not like you're going to read this word for word, but this is just becomes a cue card. So if you know, when you were in college or whenever you were studying it, you were using cue cards. It gives you a way to sort of randomly go through, and you can practice these things. So even like if you're driving to go to an interview, you can have these cue cards and you sit there at your stoplight and you go read one of them and just repeat it out, just to practice of what it is you may do. You know, Paul says he's got 33. You know, I like to tell people that, you know, take your resume, and for every bullet point on your resume, you should have a STAR story, because you never know when you go into an interview, they may go and see this 1 line and go, tell me about this. I want to know more about how you accomplished that. So, you know, be prepared. And by writing them out, number one, then you've done 2 things. You've thought about it, and you've impressed upon your brain mechanically and visually what you've done. People say that that's the best way to learn, by repeating, by writing something down. It'll reinforce in your brain what you're trying to talk about.
How do you feel about STAR stories related to volunteer experiences? Those should be relevant as well, right? So if you've done a volunteer work, that you could write STAR stories for that as well?
As long as
It
it
applies to that job.
Okay.
So I have a question. One of the things I say is we like to tell STAR stories, and if they're not asking them, then we can start with that R about a particular situation they're talking about. So would you like to hear about a time when and you gave the R. So when some people say, tell them first all the time. And I say, well, here's a time you always tell them first, is if they're not asking for stories. Now, online interview, you know, one of these things where there's nobody there, or it's just a one-way deal. How do we tell STAR stories if they're not asking them? Should we tell them or not? Just answer the question and go on? What would you do? What would you do if you had a candidate that told a story, and when I'm looking at my candidate now and going through and I'm trying to find and select a candidate, do you think that candidate would make any difference?
I'd find a way to tell the story. I don't see a reason why you wouldn't want to tell how you achieved the result. Aren't interviewers, and as an interviewer, aren't you interested in how you got there? So I'm trying to think of a situation where you wouldn't be able to tell one.
Well, if they ask you a question like, how do you handle a difficult employee? I would say, let me give you an example, and then I would tell the story.
STAR story.
All
Absolutely.
right. And just tell the story. Now, we're talking about brevity. We're not talking about 90 seconds anymore. We're talking about 30 to 60 max. See if you can't tell your stories in 30 seconds. I know for me, if I write it down and I've got it down to 20 seconds, it's still going to take me 60 seconds to tell it.
I put a question in the chat window. When you're giving your results, what are the most important metrics to include in a STAR story?
I know that one.
The thing about it is, I'm very patient. I can just sit here for a few minutes until somebody pipes up.
Maybe if you offer a $10 prize or something, Ron.
Here, you can have one of my apples. Piece of that.
Be the interviewer. All right, be the interviewer on this question. What would you like a candidate to do? What would impress you? What would you stand out for you if you were the interviewer?
What are
would
you
like?
listening for?
Yeah, what are you listening for? What would you like to hear in a STAR story?
I guess I'm
I'll give you a hint on, oh, go ahead, Jamie, Gemma.
sorry. Well, I guess I'm confused about the question because it's important metrics. It's like every STAR story should have a metric, right? This is how I achieve X. So
Unnecessarily.
So metrics are good. You can't always give an assigned metric, but we can estimate it. But metrics are definitely a good element. Way to go.
Eloise, I think you were about to say something.
Well, I was just going to say that the most important metrics to answer with depends on what the job is, right? If you're interviewing for a sales job, you want to talk about blowing through your quota by 178%. You know, if you're a project manager, you want to talk about coming in on time and under budget. And, you know, just it's not one set of metrics for every job. You want to show your value in that role.
specifically for the job that you're interviewing.
Yeah.
So, but in a list format, what might be the top 3 or 4 things that an interviewer is going to be listening to generically?
Revenue generating, cost savings.
Metrics around improvements as a result of, so to Gemma's point, increased revenue, cost savings, savings in time.
Efficiencies.
Dollars, percentages,
Oh, okay.
time saved, FTEs, positions saved or increased. You're right. Now, as Paul said, different positions require different things, but in general, people gravitate toward dollars and they gravitate toward percentages and then some kinds of savings, from that perspective. Now, savings, as I said, savings can be $1, savings can be in time, could be in full-time employees, could be in, many things, but that's kind of the, most people can recognize those things. So as you're writing those out, remember, make those metrics quantifiable in some way. And also the thing to remember is, no one's probably going to call you out on, I saved $125,000 on this project. They're going to say, are you sure it wasn't 150 or 75? So just be confident that if somebody says, well, how did you measure that? You've already thought through how you're going to answer that. So if you're going to give a statistic, make sure you have the confidence to know how you arrived at it.
Well, I'll tell you a hidden one that I look for. One, this is your communication. This is how well you communicate. This is your verbal communication skill. So I'm looking at not only the content of the story, but how you tell the story. I'm also looking at the energy or the interest or what it is in the story and how I tell it. I can remember in the pit crew was asked a question about tell a story, and he said, "Oh, that was a fun one," and then demonstrated how he was having fun as he told the steps in the story. And everybody on the panel said that was the best thing that the person did. So if we tell the story and we act like it was painful, it was terrible, it was long, it was drastic, it was just killing me, all right? If we tell it like that versus so we got some people together and we did this and I included these people and we took these kind of steps, we did through that and man, guess what happened at the end? This, and not only that, but, and then here's some other things that happened, and you have some energy in that story, it's going to be better than, well, when I worked here as a lead engineer, we had a quality issue. And so what and it's just kind of a droning type story, not different, be different. So practice how you tell it. It's your mindset that's going to make the difference. What are you thinking and feeling? And if you're thinking and feeling energized, you're thinking and feeling good about the story and you enjoy telling the story, you're proud about the results, all that sort of thing, then all that stuff will come through. But if you're thinking, please God, help me answer this question, then it's not going to be as good.
Remember, most people that when they get to the interview, if they interview 3 people or 5 people, they've already determined all or most of them already meet the minimum skill sets. They're looking for, do you fit within the team? Can that person who's interviewing, if they're the hiring manager, they're thinking, is this person going to work for me and my team? Will they fit in? Okay. How do they differentiate themselves from everybody else? As Walt said, how do they communicate? Because you can be the best worker in the world and do things, but if you can't communicate or sell that idea to someone else, then it may put more work on the manager themselves.
I inherited an employee one time that I said, this is a fantastic technical employee. He is way above and beyond everybody else. Just don't let him talk to anybody, please. As soon as he opens his mouth, that would screw it all up.
I've got a question for you, Walt.
Why
So
me?
'cause
Ask
I like your answers.
Oh, okay.
So I had an interview last Thursday, and I'm about to send out the thank you email. The guy's in Portugal, and I thought of a much better answer to one of the questions that I answered in the interview. Do you think it's okay for me to say I wanted to thank you for your, and this is very much in keeping with my personality and the personality that I showed during the interview, but I'm thinking about saying, I've been kicking myself since the interview about the answer I gave to this question, and here's a better answer. You think that's okay?
Well, before I answer that, all the participants out there, what would you suggest? Be the interviewer.
Put yourself in that interviewer's position.
You're the interviewer, and you get this in a thank you note, and you get this better answer. What is your impression?
I personally would like it. Particularly if the conversation went really well and this was in character with the discussion. To me, it shows care, and I might not say the words kicking myself for not saying this, but I think it demonstrates a level of professionalism and engagement. So as a hiring manager, I would appreciate it.
By the way, I know that I'm moving on to the next step because my next interview is tomorrow. So I didn't answer it so badly that I blew the interview, but I did have I thought about it again and came up with a much better answer for the role.
So
Anybody
Paul, I
else?
guess one of my questions, go ahead.
I'll just say, does anybody else have a thought? Go ahead, Ron, if you had something.
Paul, if you know you're moving on to the next round, is a possibility for you to bring that up in that and give that better answer, and might that filter back to the person you should have given that answer to?
I thought about that too. I don't know if they talk to each other. One guy's in Portugal, the other guy's in New York. And they both have the same title.
So their peers.
Yep. And I'm interviewing to be their boss.
If you're interviewing to be their boss, I'm not, yeah.
Potentially
So-
be their boss.
So basically, they are influencers, but not decision makers in the process.
I think they could rule me out easily.
Okay.
Yeah, they can't hire me, but they could say, don't hire that guy.
Yeah,
Do you feel your answer fit within that category of it? Your answer may have been such that it puts you at risk?
No, I just have been kicking myself that I didn't give a better answer.
Well, we've all been there.
I know the answer that would have been the right answer versus the one that I gave. I mean,
I would not think that there's just about any interview that we walk out of that we can't think of something we could have done better. You know, and that becomes our learning point to say, okay, in fact, in the handout, I have a little questionnaire after an interview. Say, did we do this? Did we do this? Did we do this? And it's to help us look back on our interview and see what did we learn? What might we do different? How do we handle it? That sort of thing to help us with that. There's always options, Paul, and I always generally talk about options because it's very difficult to say, you know, here's what I do in this situation without knowing fully the situation. Options. Have you sent a thank you note to those two?
well, I've only been interviewed by one of them so far. So,
Okay, all right. But have you sent a thank you note already or not?
no, I'm about to.
Okay. One option for you to do is to say, you know, I'll follow some additional information. Now, I need brevity in this because I don't want to read this long email, right? So brevity with that. Or you can say, you know, I was been thinking about what we discussed about topic A, and I would love to talk to you more about that. Would you be available? Could I call you? Would you contact me or something? And just make it an option to them to say, if you want to talk more about it and you want to have something to it, then they can call, and it, you know, it's up to them if they want to hear it or if they don't want to hear it. So that's an option. The other is to send a separate note instead of the thank you note and say, I've thought more about that. I'd like to discuss this with you. All right. And that way it doesn't say I have a better answer or something like that, but I just want to talk a little bit more about it. And prepare a question or two that you might want to ask as well, so that when you get into the discussion, it's just not a better answer. It's also some additional information that you might think of to talk about, to ask them, so to, you know, to get more details about a situation or something like that. So that's an option. Option 3, don't do anything. Just leave it alone. All right. And you're trying to satisfy yourself, but what does that do? Is there any risk in doing that? Or is there a problem, or is there a negative, or is it going to gain me anything? Or how is it going to help me as far as demonstrating a better answer and something to that, so that you can get a better vote for him to go on? And if you think it's worthwhile and you think it would be positive, and you think you might, you know, you might could turn that reference, that influence from a B to an A, then why not? All right. So what hurts? What's the negative thing if you do that? What's wrong with doing that? What would be bad about that? How would people see that? So I'm going to ask the group if somebody did that, would you see, as you possibly see that as a negative for the candidate?
I would sit on the fence depending upon whether or not I already had a positive sitting on the fence or a negative mindset of that person coming out. If I had a negative response, I would view it as negative. If I was sitting on the fence, it might lean me toward the positive. And if I was positive, I think it'd do nothing, but it's unlikely it's going to go in the negative for me. So,
Okay, Ron, so on a risk scale 1 to 10, where 10 is a very high risk and 1 is a very low risk, what do you think you would scale this approach?
I'd say his risk is probably a 2, especially since Paul already knows he's moving forward.
Okay, so low risk.
I think it's a low risk.
What would, tell me give me some information from some other suggestions and ideas. And how you would feel about it.
Well, my one comment would be, the interview was on Thursday. How come the thank you note didn't go out on Friday or Saturday? You know, waiting now, you're now 5 days later. You know, if you're gonna send a thank you note out, you need to get it out within 48 hours, I think,
24,
24 hours.
Yeah.
maximum 48, but the sooner.
I mean, because if you had sent them a thank you note on Friday, you know, thanking them for the interview, blah, 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 and then Monday or today, you hadn't thought of the better answer anyway. Hey, I really appreciate, talking with you, but, I was thinking, and, I just want to sort of follow up with it. I think then you've got like a second way to follow up, which I think would have worked a little bit better than waiting.
We had a holiday weekend in there and it took me till today to get the guy's email.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if it's low risk, if you can assign a risk factor to it, then, if it's what number of risk do you say, no, I shouldn't do it at all? Is it a 4, a 5, a 6? I mean, where do you think that would be appropriate? Because the hiring process is often one of reducing risk. They don't want to hire somebody that's going to leave if it's not going to work out. So if you see it as a risk factor of a higher risk, just don't do it. But how would you see it, Paul, in the risk category?
Very low.
Okay.
Go for
I
it.
think I had a really good conversational interview with the guy. He asked me an exceptionally difficult question. And I thought about it, and I've been thinking about it ever since. And I thought, I know what he was looking for. And anyway.
So let's all vote. Okay, we're going to vote. Put in the chat window your risk factor 1 through 10. And say, this is high risk, low risk, or whatever. So put a number in there so that we can get some idea of perhaps where we stand. Three, 4. And Richard's a senior person. That's an important vote. 66. Don't send it to Jeff. 4. Okay.
No, actually, I give it a 6. Like kind of in the middle, but would lean towards doing it.
If it would add a lot of value and really reduce a lot of risk, go for it. But if it's not quite that significant and it's just an itch you want to scratch, maybe you ought to just leave it alone.
And thank you notes should be short. I mean, if your answer is going to be, a couple
Yeah,
paragraphs.
it's like 5 words.
5 words, okay. Oh, go for it. Do it.
If it's only 5 words, go for it. Yeah.
Go for it. Do it.
Especially if it's a difficult question, because they probably recognize it's a difficult question. And as a hiring manager, I probably would appreciate someone who said, I took the time to consider my answer, and this is, probably a better response in some way, however you're going to word that.
in the workshop, I have a handout and there's a page about thank you notes and it gives you some parameters and ideas for a strong and different thank you note.
So question to the group. Is this kind of format valuable enough that maybe we ought to do this once a month? Or every time we have a fifth Monday, but we ought to increase the format of this kind of session? Go ahead and just put a yes or no there, and we'll just so we can tally them.
Well, I feel sure there's some concerns about interviewing that are out there that people are also concerned about putting it forth to the group. But we welcome anything. We're here to help participate. And there's a lot of participants who have been through lots of interviewing and have done some things and learned some things that would be valuable.
And feel free to say no. I mean, this is, there's nothing the matter with saying that this did not provide value to you. Your name will not go on a list, I promise you.
Certainly provided value to me.
Okay.
Me too.
All right, well.
Well, if you say no, the Department of Justice might get your name.
Okay, then we will do this more with kind of a short presentation on something and then, open this up in kind of this format. Because, even though we're a service organization, our goal is just to help you get better, period. However that is, and that means taking input from you telling us how to get better.
Incidentally, session 4 out of those 13 sessions that Ron gave you a link to is about video interviewing, and it gives you tips about just the video portion, not the interview portion, but the video portion. So if you're interested in looking up more details, session 4 on video interviewing may help you out.
Those of you that aren't aware, Walt and Mark McDonald had 13 videos that are published on YouTube. And there's a document out there in that directory, that link that I gave you, that has those, gives a summary of each and a hyperlink where to go find those. You don't have to look for them, even though they're on Jeff's site and you can find them through Jeff.
Yeah, we'll go over those 13 lessons here in just a second. As we wrap up, we'll show you where they're at.
That'd be great.
Ron, if you will, put that document back in the chat window for anybody who joined late. They're not going to get it. So if you can put it back in again, that'd be great.
This document or the one on the videos?
The one with the videos. That is where everything's at. I think the very first thing you put in the chat.
Here, I can stick it in there, Ron.
You got it? Okay.
Ron, do you have anything else or are we done?
I think we're done. If somebody
All done. All right. Let me just share a few more slides and we'll get out of here this afternoon. Thank you, Ron, and everybody else who participated in today's presentation. Career DFW and Career USA, we're putting on training 4 days a week. Please join us tomorrow, being the first Thursday of the month for Effective Resume Thursday. We'll talk about the best practices for an effective resume. And then if anybody would like to volunteer to show their current draft resume, we'll do that in the second part of the workshop tomorrow at 1 p.m. This Friday at the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group meeting at 9:30 in the morning. We're going to do open forum, a little bit like what we just did today. We'll talk about whatever questions you have about your job search. Bring those with us and we can go into more details. If you think anything over the next couple of days, jot them down and come join us Friday morning. We'll talk about that. We are meeting in person. So if you live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, please come join us in person. If you're outside the DFW area, please feel free to join us on Facebook or the Zoom link that we'll publish out tomorrow afternoon. Next Tuesday for LinkedIn Tuesdays, like Alderson will be with us. We'll talk about how to use LinkedIn for job hunting, strategies to get results. This session has been recorded and we will put it on the Career DFW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channel. One of the things you'll find on the Career USA YouTube channel, we have over 500 videos currently there. If you click on playlist, the easiest way, it cuts it down to one of 7 different playlists. Every video that I go goes into a playlist. And then down below, where you see that green arrow, click on view full playlist for whatever list you want. Up will come a list of all the different topics and stuff. One of the things you'll find, and this is the 13-part workshop that Walt talked about, that Ron's talked about, all the different sessions that you'll be able to find. The first 5 sessions talk specifically about what do you do to prepare for the interview, things you need to think about before going into an interview, analyzing the job description, how to do a video interview, prepare for specific types of interviewing. The second 5 lessons are what you do during an interview. Whoever thought there'd be so much information on how to prepare for an interview? But you got to remember, your resume and your LinkedIn profile aren't going to get you a job. They only get you a phone call. How well you practice these skills, this is what's going to get you your next job. And then your last 3 topics are just some advanced topics on how to shorten your job search, how to use information interview, how to handle a difficult interview or difficult questions. So all that stuff, it is on the YouTube channel. Just scroll down because there'll be other things above it as we've added new lessons, but just scroll down and you'll find all of a sudden session 13, session 12, session 765 that you can go back and watch any one at your convenience. If you're not receiving emails about our workshops, please join the Career USA mailing list. You can just scan that QR code or send an email to Career USA, the + subscribe at groups.io. If you scan that QR code, it'll start an email, and all you have to do is hit send. You don't have to put any information in it. It will automatically do that. You will never be spammed because I control the list. You only will get the topic of the day, the title of the day, and most importantly, the Zoom link of the day. That way you can just open the email and join us with whatever session we're doing every day. Please remember, Career DFW, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Walt's a volunteer, Ron's a volunteer, the PIT crew is a volunteer organization. They're just here to help you land your next great opportunity. So thank you very much for joining us today, everybody. Have a great Wednesday, and hopefully we will see you tomorrow or Friday.